Pursuant to the Speaker of the House of Representatives acting in accordance with Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 7, the House will come to order. Prayer by the Chaplain.
Madam Speaker and members, I'm going to offer a non-denominational version of a prayer from the Lutheran tradition. Lord God, you have called your servants to ventures of which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, through perils unknown. Give us faith to go out with good courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us and your love supporting us. Amen.
The chaplain for today is Representative Ryan Winkler from District 46A, Golden Valley, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. So members, now we get to the unconventional part where the clerk will take the roll. Remember, for those folks on the phone, that to the extent you can answer when your name is alphabetically called, it speeds things up. For the first roll call of the day, please state your name, your city, and present.
Acom.
Acom, Minnetonka, present.
Acom, Minnetonka, present. Albright. Albright, St. Paul, present. Anderson.
Anderson, Varsness Township, present.
Anderson, Parsons Township, present. Backer.
Backer, Browns Valley, present.
Backer, Browns Valley, present. Bonner.
Bonner, St. Paul, present.
Bonner, St. Paul, present. Barr. Barr, St. Paul, present. Baker. Baker, St. Paul, present. Becker Finn.
Becker Finn, St. Paul, present.
Becker Finn, St. Paul, present. Bennett.
Bennett, Albert Lee, present.
Bennett, Albert Lee, present. Bernardi.
Bernardi, St. Paul, present.
Bernardi, St. Paul, present. Bierman.
Bierman, St. Paul, present.
Bierman, St. Paul, present. Bow.
Bow, St. Paul, present.
Bow, St. Paul, present. Brand.
Brand, St. Paul, present.
Brand, St. Paul, present. Cantrell.
Cantrell, St. Paul, present.
Cantrell, St. Paul, present. Carlson A.
Carlson A, St. Paul, present.
Carlson A, St. Paul, present. Carlson L.
Carlson L, St. Paul, present.
Carlson L, St. Paul, present. Christensen. Christensen. Claflin.
Claflin, South St. Paul, present.
Claflin, South St. Paul, present. Considine.
Considine, Mankato, present.
Considine, Mankato, present. Daniels.
Daniels, Faribault, present.
Daniels, Faribault, present. Doubt. Doubt, St. Paul, present. Davids. David, St. Paul, present. Davney.
Davney, St. Paul, present.
Davney, St. Paul, present. Dean.
Dean, St. Paul, present.
Dean, St. Paul, present. Damuth. Damuth, St. Paul, present. Detmer.
Detmer, St. Paul, present.
Detmer, St. Paul, present. Drazkowski. Drazkowski, St. Paul, present. Eklund.
Eklund, International Falls, present.
Eklund, International Falls, present. Edelson.
Edelson, St. Paul, present.
Edelson, St. Paul, present. Elkins.
Elkin, St. Paul, present.
Elkins, St. Paul, present. Erickson. Erickson, St. Paul, present. Fabian.
Fabian, Roseau, present.
Fabian, Roseau, present. Fisher.
Fisher, St. Paul, present.
Fisher, St. Paul, present. Franzen.
Alexandria Township, present.
Friends in Alexandria Township, present. Freiburg.
Freiburg, St. Paul, present.
Freiburg, St. Paul, present. Garofalo.
Garofalo, Farmington, present.
Garofalo, Farmington, present. Gomez.
Gomez, St. Paul, present.
Gomez, St. Paul, present. Green. Green, St. Paul, present. Grossel.
Grossel, Clearbrook, present.
Grossel, Clearbrook, present. Grunhagen.
Grunhagen, Glencoe, present.
Grunhagen, Glencoe, present. Gunther.
Gunther, Fairmont, present.
Gunther, Fairmont, present. Haley. Haley, St. Paul, present. Halverson. Halverson.
Halverson, Egan, present.
Halverson, Egan, present. Hamilton.
Hamilton, Mountain Lake, present.
Hamilton, Mountain Lake, present. Hanson.
Hanson, Harmony, present.
Hanson, Harmony, present. Hassan.
Hassan, Minneapolis, present.
Hassan, Minneapolis, present. Hausman. Hausman.
I'm Hausman, St. Paul, present.
Hausman, St. Paul, present. Heinrich.
Heinrich, St. Paul, present.
Heinrich, St. Paul, present. Heinzeman.
Heinzman, Nisswa, present.
Heinzman, Nizwa, present. Her.
Her, St. Paul, present.
Her, St. Paul, present. Hertos.
Hertos from Greenfield, present.
Hertos, Greenfield, present. Hornstein.
Hornstein, Minneapolis, present.
Hornstein, Minneapolis, present. Howard.
Howard, St. Paul, present.
Howard, St. Paul, present. Hewitt.
Hewitt, St. Paul, present.
Hewitt, St. Paul, present. Johnson.
St. Paul, present.
Johnson, St. Paul, present. Jordan.
Jordan, St. Paul, present.
Jordan, St. Paul, present. Jurgens.
Jurgens, Cottage Grove, present.
Jurgens, Cottage Grove, present. Keel.
Hammond Township, Kiel, Hammond Township, present.
Keel, Hammond Township, present. Cleveland.
Cleveland, St. Paul, present.
Cleveland, St. Paul, present. Cagill.
Cagle, Spring Lake Park, present.
Cagill, Spring Lake Park, present. Katiza Wattoon.
Katiza Wattoon, Eden Prairie, present.
Katiza Wattoon, Eden Prairie, present. Kosnick. Kosnick. Creshaw.
Cosmic, St. Paul, present.
Kosnick, St. Paul, present. Creshaw.
Creshaw, St. Paul, present.
Creshaw, St. Paul, present. Kunish Podine.
Kunish Podine, New Brighton, present.
Kunish Podine, New Brighton, present. Lehman. Lehman, St. Paul, present. Lee.
Lee, Minneapolis, present.
Lee, Minneapolis, present. Lesh.
Lesh, St. Paul, present.
Lesh, St. Paul, present. Liebling.
Liebling, Rochester, present.
Liebling, Rochester, present. Lean.
Lean, Moorhead, present.
Lean, Moorhead, present. Lily.
Lily, St. Paul, present.
Lily, St. Paul, present. Lippert.
Lippert, St. Paul, present.
Lippert, St. Paul, present. Lislagard.
Lislagard, Aurora, present.
Lislagard, Aurora, present. Long.
Long, St. Paul, present.
Long, St. Paul, present. Lucero. Lucero, St. Paul, present. Lewick. Lewick. Mahoney excused. Mann.
Man, Lakeville, present.
Man, Lakeville, present. Mariani.
Mariani, St. Paul, present.
Mariani, St. Paul, present. Markwart.
Markwart, Dilworth, present.
Markwart, Dilworth, present. Mason.
Mason, St. Paul, present.
Mason, St. Paul, present. McDonald.
McDonald, Delano, present.
McDonald, Delano, present. Mecklin.
Mecklin, Clear Lake, present.
Mecklin, Clear Lake, present. Miller. Miller, St. Paul, present. Moeller.
Moeller, St. Paul, present.
Moeller, St. Paul, present. Moran.
Moran, St. Paul, present.
Moran, St. Paul, present. Morrison.
Morrison, St. Paul, present.
Morrison, St. Paul, present. Munson. Munson, St. Paul, present. Murphy.
Murphy, Hermantown, present.
Murphy, Hermantown, present. Nash.
Nash, Waconia, present.
Nash, Waconia, present. Nelson M.
Nelson M., St. Paul, present.
Nelson M., St. Paul, present. Nelson N.
Nelson N., Clover Township, present.
Nelson N., Clover Township, present. New.
New, North Branch, present.
New, North Branch, present. Nor.
Nor, St. Paul, present.
Nor, St. Paul, present. Nornis.
Nornis, Fergus Falls, present.
Nornis, Fergus Falls, present. Novotny.
Novotny, Elk River, present.
Novotny, Elk River, present. O'Driscoll.
O'Driscoll, St. Paul, present.
O'Driscoll, St. Paul, present. Olson.
Olson, Duluth, present.
Olson, Duluth, present. O'Neill.
O'Neill, Maple Lake, present.
O'Neill, Maple Lake, present. Pulowski.
Pulowski, Winona, present.
Pulowski, Winona, present. Purcell.
Purcell, St. Paul, present.
Purcell, St. Paul, present. Petersburg.
Petersburg, Waseca, present.
Petersburg, Waseca, present. Pearson.
Pearson, Rochester Township, present.
Pearson, Rochester Township, present. Pinto.
Pinto, St. Paul, present.
Pinto, St. Paul, present. Poppy.
Poppy, Austin, present.
Poppy, Austin, present. Poston.
Poston, Lakeshore, present.
Poston, Lakeshore, present. Pryor.
Pryor, St. Paul, present.
Pryor, St. Paul, present. Quam.
Guam, St. Paul, present.
Quam, St. Paul, present. Richardson.
Richardson, St. Paul, present.
Richardson, St. Paul, present. Robbins.
Robin, St. Paul, present.
Robbins, St. Paul, present. Runbeck. Runbeck, St. Paul, present. Sandell.
Sandell, Woodbury, present.
Sandell, Woodbury, present. Sandsted.
Sandsted, Hibbing, present.
Sandsted, Hibbing, present. Sauk.
South, Rochester, present.
Sauk, Rochester, present. Schumacher.
Schumacher, St. Paul, present.
Schumacher, St. Paul, present. Schultz.
Schultz, St. Paul, present.
Schultz, St. Paul, present. Scott. Scott, St. Paul, present. Stevenson.
Stevenson, St. Paul, present.
Stevenson, St. Paul, present. Sundin.
Sundin, St. Paul, present.
Sundin, St. Paul, present. Swazinski.
Swazinski, Northern Township, present.
Swazinski, Northern Township, present. Tabke.
Tabke, Shakopee, present.
Tabke, Shakopee, present. Tice.
Tice, St. Cloud, present.
Tice, St. Cloud, present. Torkelson.
Torkelson, Hanska, present.
Torkelson, Hanska, present. Erdahl.
Erdahl, Acton Township, present.
Erdahl, Afton Township, present. Vang.
Vane, Brooklyn Center, present.
Vang, Brooklyn Center, present. Vogel.
Vogel, Elko, Newmarket, present.
Vogel, Elko, Newmarket, present. Wagenius.
Wagenius, Minneapolis, present.
Wagenius, Minneapolis, present. Wozlowick.
Wazluwick, St. Paul, present.
Wozlowick, St. Paul, present. West.
West, Blaine, present.
West, Blaine, present. Winkler. Winkler, St. Paul, present. Wolgamott.
Wolgamott, St. Paul, present.
Wolgamott, St. Paul, present. Zhang J, excused. Zhang T.
Young T, St. Paul, present.
Zhang T, St. Paul, present. Joachim.
Joachim, St. Paul, present.
Joachim, St. Paul, present. Speaker Hortman. Speaker Hortman, St. Paul, present. Christensen. Christensen.
Christensen, St. Paul, present.
Christensen, St. Paul, present. Lewick.
Present. Lewick, Aiken, present.
Lewick, Aiken, present.
A quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 91st Session, 2020, 80th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Friday, April 17th, 2020.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. I took them. Comparison reports. There's a copy of this order of business on each member's desk. If there is no objection, the motions will prevail. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail and the substitutions will be made. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business is online. If there is no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading, House File number 2986.
Second reading.
Second reading, House File number 2987.
Second reading. Second reading of Senate files.
Second reading, Senate File number 2184.
Second reading.
Second reading, Senate File 3125.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction and first reading of House Files 4577 through 4604.
First reading, House files 4577 through 4604. Messages from the Senate.
Messages from the Senate, Madam Speaker. I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following Senate files herewith transmitted. Senate file numbers 979, 1098, 2919, 2939, 3017, 3159, 3197, and 3358. Message assigned Cal R. Ludeman, Secretary of the Senate.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading of Senate File number 979, an act relating to human services. The bill is being referred to the Early Childhood Finance and Policy Division. First reading, Senate File number 1098, an act relating to health. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. First reading, Senate File number 2919, an act relating to health. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services Policy. First reading, Senate File number 2939. Morrison moves that Senate File number 2939 and House File number 3028, now on the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
First reading, Senate File number 3017, an act relating to human services. Lippert moved that Senate File number 3017 and House File Number 3074, now on the general register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objection, so ordered.
First reading, Senate File Number 3159, an act relating to health. The bill is being referred to the Health and Human Services Finance Division. First reading, Senate File Number 3197, an act relating to child care. Wozlowick moved that Senate File Number 3197 and House File Number 3173, now on the general register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Without objection, so ordered.
First reading, Senate File Number 3358, an act relating to employment. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Labor. First reading, Senate File Number 4486, an act relating to state finances. The bill is being referred to the Committee on Ways and Means.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I'm going to move a recess to the call of the chair so that the Rules Committee can meet and waive deadlines for 3 bills. It should take just a couple of minutes. Rules Committee members, please prepare to get on the Zoom link, and the committee will begin shortly. So, Madam Speaker, I move a recess to the call of the chair.
Discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The House stands in recess.